What happens is the story picks up 15 years later, and it's how these two characters in the first sections from Africa and from New York come together. And so I think it's a good read. Are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions or thoughts or anything? So I'm just signing books?
Now, talk about how you came up with the idea. I think people like that.
Okay. Well, some of you know, I made my living as a writer and a producer in Hollywood, and I did a lot of television shows and some movies. And I was always looking for ideas. That's what producers do. You try to get a project and you see if you can make it work. So in 1987, I read a very short blurb in the Los Angeles Times about a Nigerian man who was living in London, very happy in his life. He was actually working in the government, who suddenly got contacted by the elders of his tribe from Nigeria that the king had died and he was the next in line to be the king. And the article went on, he didn't want to leave. He had a very nice life, but he had to go back. And I just thought, oh, that's an interesting idea. What would you do if you suddenly found out that, you're a king of a tribe and you have to go back and your whole life is uprooted? So, but, and at first I thought of it as a comedy because of Eddie Murphy's Coming to America movie. I thought it was like the flip of that. It's a guy going back to Africa rather than an African coming to America. But how things happen, nothing really worked. People liked the idea. And then about 5 years ago, I decided that I didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. I'm an older guy now, and I wanted to spend my time creatively doing what I wanted to do. So I started that. I felt I had the confidence to become, write narrative prose and become an author. So I thought about what would be a good book, and I said, I like books that take me places, that I haven't been, and so I said, that book could really that could be fun to write. I mean, I would learn a lot and stuff like that. And so I contacted the Kenyan embassy in Los Angeles, and I had a meeting there with them, and I just wanted to know if what I was thinking about could possibly happen, where a mining company had found precious metals, and they wanted to move the tribe off their sacred homeland that they had been living on for 400 years. And anyway, to make a long story short, it was happening then. So there was a Canadian company that had found titanium, and they were moving out. There was a big to-do in Kenya that they were trying to move their tribe off their sacred homeland. And recently, I got an email from a friend who read the book and really enjoyed it, that just a couple of months ago, the Maasai tribe, which is probably the most famous tribe in Kenya, the Maasai Mara, and the government was trying to move them off their homeland that they had lived in this one section because they wanted to have the land was really great for safaris, and they wanted to take it over and have rich people go on safari there. So there's a big, I think it was rejected finally because there was a big uproar in the country. But this is happening all over the world. And so one of my themes of the book is to ensure the future, we must preserve the past, which I feel strongly about. And so anyway, that's how it happened. Yes.
Hi, Riff.
Hi, Alice.
Hello, everybody. I'm just happy to be here in this wonderful library in Long Beach where my mom used to do concerts. Hazel Glass. So, but I know... Louder? So I know that in addition to being a writer and an all-around wonderful guy, that you're a wonderful musician, and I would like you to maybe talk about how your musicianship contributed to this wonderful book.
Well, many of you know our family was in the music business. My dad produced jazz concerts and managed a record store in New York City called the Commodore Music Shop. My brother Billy talks about it also a lot. It's in his show, and I'm sure my brother Joel, who's very active in the communities. You know, so I'm sure maybe you all know that, but so we grew up around music. And then my Uncle Milt, my mom's older brother, was one of the great legendary music producers of the 20th century. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for producing Rock Around the Clock. He produced Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, which Time magazine said was the most important popular recording of the 20th century. And he worked with every great artist. So that was the world that I grew up in. And then I guess I had those genes, and I was into music a lot, and I played saxophone, clarinet, and bass clarinet for Alice's mom in this very library. And then I began to, I always could sing, and I was singing even the last few years. I sang at Feinstein's at the Regency and, other places, and recorded a few albums. And so this is a lot also about music. The title of Reign Supreme is an homage to John Coltrane's classic jazz album, A Love Supreme, which A Love Supreme is about. This album is a very spiritual album, which A Love Supreme is his love for the Supreme Being that gave him the talent to make music. And so that was what that album is about. It's a magical album, and so John Coltrane is sort of like a muse in this thing, and it's also how my lead character became a jazz prodigy who plays tenor saxophone, and then he loses his way, and it's how he gets back on his way at the end. So, music's, and the book is very musical, I think, in just the rhythm of the writing and stuff.
Did you actually go to Kenya to do research for the
I didn't
book?
go to Kenya, but my wife and I went to Africa for our 25th wedding anniversary. And a very interesting, and it was an incredible experience. I don't know if any of you have been to Africa, to experience seeing animals in the wild like that. It's just absolutely thrilling and inspirational. And we love animals, and so it was, I don't know, I must have taken 1,000 pictures. And we had a couple of experiences that were, where an elephant charged the Land Rover, and just seeing some of the things, and so it was unforgettable. And so I had a feeling for it. And then when I decided that I would write the book, I was working on it, and maybe a lot of you have seen Downton Abbey. It's a wonderful show. And Julian Fellows, who created it, was talking about how experiences in his life that were dramatic, he gave to characters in Downton Abbey. He lived those, and so he knew, and he said he could write with confidence about those experiences. And the light bulb just went off in my head. I said, so I could write confidently about things that I experienced in Africa. And I gave it to the characters in my book. So, basically I knew what I was talking about. And the book took me 3 years to write, and it was extensively researched. And when you read it, I think it takes you there, Yeah.
Oh,